Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tea and Tarot for January 2021. And I'm excited about today's topic that I'm sharing with you. We're going to be doing some work to ascertain what the Tarot means to us in terms of different deities. And certainly there are various different decks, such as Chris Waldeher's Beautiful Goddess Tarot or the Druid Craft Tarot or other, famous and popular decks that depict specific deities for the cards. And they're usually named that way so that this is represents Cernunnos or this one represents Isis. But in the everyday use of the tarot, we also just kind of have our own, what we might call free range associations with different cards and deities. And that's what we're here to focus on today, is which deities we associate with the various different cards and which meanings that elucidates for us of each card. Because, for example, somebody who identifies Isis as the magician card, as in Chris Waldeher's Goddess deck, which is the card that I used in the promo for today's class. We know if we look at that and we see Isis as the magician, that there's going to be a heavier focus on the alchemical meaning of the magician card, on the sorcery, the magical aspect, the story of Isis using her Heka, her supreme power, the power of breath and the word to create magic in the world. Whereas somebody else might say, oh, wow, well, yeah, I really see Isis as that magician card, but really I see Isis as the Empress card. And then the focus is more on her connection with nature and her maternal aspects and her creative aspects, which are not necessarily separate from the creative aspects of the magician, but they have their own tone. They each have their own tone. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And welcome to everyone who's come in since I was explaining. Hi, Lisa, Jennifer, love your hair. Jennifer, it looks awesome. So cute. And Laura, hi, Laura. So good to see your face.
I have missed you so much. I can't even tell you how much I've missed you.
I miss you so much. Am I going to see you soon?
As long as I can drive through that snow, honey, I'm going to see you on Monday.
Awesome. Okay. Well, be careful driving. It is snowy. And tomorrow tomorrow I'm still down in the Bay Area, but then I'll be home tomorrow afternoon. Okay.
I meant the next Monday.
Oh,
Monday.
Okay, then we're good. All right, everybody, let's dive in. So first of all, I don't think we're going to have time today to go through absolutely every card in the Major Arcana that we have deities for. We'll get through quite a few of them. I thought maybe what I would do is I would pick a couple that might seem a little more easy, I guess you might say, and then some that might be a little more difficult. So go ahead as you've got your Major Arcana there, and let's pick out the High Priestess. Let's pick out the Hierophant. Let's pick out the Chariot and the Hermit. Let's pick Death and the Star and the Judgment card. And we're going to start with these ones. And this is sort of a combination of cards, some of which this is just based on my experience, people tend to have stronger opinions about cards like Death or the Star or High Priestess. And then sometimes cards like the Hierophant, the Chariot, and the Hermit and Judgment are a little bit more open to interpretation or a little bit more nebulous. Um, I can say them again, sure. The high priestess, then the Hierophant, then the Chariot, then the Hermit, then Death, the Star, and Judgment. So we're going to go through these and we're going to talk a little bit just briefly about the meaning of each, very briefly, but then we're going to try to really elucidate the meaning, what we see as the meaning of the card through deities that we're going to, talk about today. And I'm going to share my thoughts, but I hope you're going to share some of your own. And at the end, if we don't get a lot out of these 7, then I'll open it up and some of you can share other cards and deities that you might have associations with. You're also welcome, once we get going, to type some of those other ones into the chat. So let's start with the High Priestess. The High Priestess represents female spiritual authority, the natural female spiritual authority of women. It can represent mystery. It can represent oracular work or work that is intended to be divinatory in nature. It can represent secrets and hidden wisdom or esoteric wisdom or initiatory wisdom. So the High Priestess, does anybody have a strong vibe that they get about the High Priestess that reminds you of a particular deity, a particular goddess, a particular mythological character? Anybody have one that you think, oh, this is hands down, the High Priestess is this or that? If you do, go ahead and type it into the chat or give a little wave. I want to give a little chance if you have something you feel strongly about. Morgane Le Fay, says Christina, and Isis, says Cosette. Hecate, says Lisette. Excellent. These are some great choices. So let's unpack some of these. The first one, Morgane Le Fay, that one is so fantastic. Christina, do you feel like you might be comfortable, confident to share a little bit about your vision of Morgane Le Fay as the High Priestess in the Tarot?
Hi. Oh gosh, this is pretty spontaneous. I hadn't thought about it at all, obviously. But just when I read the book, which is like, the name is actually slipping my mind right now. But that book with Morgane Le Fay and the King Arthur legend and Guinevere.
Miss of Avalon.
Thank you, Miss of Avalon. Well, Morgane Le Fay and Guinevere seem to me like two women that is maybe like two sides of women in a way. And Morgane was definitely the darker, spiritual, from the deep waters. Like, she could walk the water. She could carry you across the land that you never saw existed. She was just sort of a gatekeeper like that. So it was like that side of the mystery of women I felt she represented.
I love that interpretation and really can see it in so far as with that story, which, the Mists of Avalon is, has been, I would say it's like a gateway drug for women coming into the magical landscape. For many of us, read it when we were younger. I read it when I was 13 or so and thought, yep, like that. Mm-hmm. And there is this real beauty to the depiction of the difficult decisions that Morgane Le Fay needs to make about a life in, having like a normal life, what we might call a normal life with marriage or family or things like that, versus her calling as a priestess. And there's like a really dynamic tension in that character around what she'll choose. And rather than choosing more like Guinevere's path, where it's like wife and, mother and, or wife and consort and figurehead. Morgan Le Fay is like secret advisor, secret lover, secret kind of power behind the throne in a way. And that high priestess, because of the nature of the secrecy of her archetype and the hidden kind of wisdom that she carries, that does make a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that one, Christina. I love that. And then I see in the chat we had quite a few people who gave the vote for Isis and Hecate. We had a couple of those. Anybody who felt really strongly about Isis want to share what it is about Isis that really resonates for you as the high priestess archetype? Anybody care to bring yourself off mute and give a little idea about that, or type it into the chat and I'm happy to read it aloud? Or the ones who said Hecate, I can really see that too.
Share a little bit about Isis.
Sure.
Especially since I don't have much of a relationship with her, so I'm also curious to hear what other people think. She was the first image that popped into my mind with this card because for me, Isis is a very mysterious goddess. She very much is a goddess of mystery and the divine feminine, and someone who is in complete control and mastery of her arts. And that is what this card represents to me. But also, I'm using the Rider-Waite-Smith deck at the moment, and because this card in particular has these, the two pillars, and she's got the Torah in her hand, and in the sort of Western magical tradition, there's a lot of mythical history involving Egypt as a source of all of that information, whether the reality of that is the case or not. But the other figure that pops into my mind looking at this card, maybe more obviously, is Persephone, because in the Rider-Waite deck, she has the pomegranates behind her. But for me, Persephone is a dual figure. Like I often think of her as this young maiden figure who's still sort of in the fields, but then as the queen of the underworld, she's quite different. And I guess this card would have her as that more mature figure. That's my sense of it.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Isis as the guardian of the mysteries makes so much sense. And as the source of esoteric wisdom makes so much sense for the high priestess card. But, interestingly, Cosette, when you mentioned Persephone, Juliet Sharman Burke, creator of the Mythic Tarot, which is focused on Greek myths, depicts the high priestess as Persephone. And it's interesting because it's Persephone, and it is kind of that more mature version of Persephone. It's Persephone seated on her on her underworld throne. She still has the pillars. She has a bouquet of limp flowers, suggesting that this is now after her commitment to being under the, in the underworld with Hades for a portion of each year. And there's kind of a solemnity in her acceptance of that and a realization of her role in bringing that life to the underworld and bringing that comfort to people who are looking for answers to, why their lives went the way that it went. So you're not alone in that interpretation. And I think that a lot of people who find Persephone's decisions confusing or Persephone's story confusing also would associate her with the high priestess, because the high priestess has that inscrutable quality, and so does Persephone. Thank you so much for sharing that interpretation. And let's hear from a Hecate devotee here. Anybody who wants to talk about Hecate as the high priestess, why you see her as the high priestess. Go ahead and bring yourself off mute if you've got something you'd like to share about Hecate.
Yeah, I mentioned Hecate. So the way that I see Hecate is, definitely queen of witches, queen and goddess of magic, definitely an underworld type of goddess queen, queen of the night. So I associate all of that to high magic, a high priestess. I could totally see that connection of queen and goddess figure, very much, uh, you know, uh, like, in other words, knowing all of the secrets of the universe. She's got the keys to knowledge and the underworld. And so I totally, in my mind, I totally make that connection.
You
I see her
know, that's so right. And in the Orphic hymn to Hecate, she's called keeper of the keys of all the universe. And she is, in fact, that guardian of mystery. And she has a very crucial role in ferrying the souls of the dead, especially the restless dead in ancient Greek mythos. She is the one who brings the sort of retinue of the restless dead along with her. And, she's said to be the night roaming one. So there are a lot of associations that I'm hearing here with the high priestess, with the night, with obviously the mysteries, with mysteries of life, death, and rebirth. And thank you so much, Lisette. That's a great interpretation. I'm the deck, by the way, that I'm using today, I've borrowed from a friend, and then I had to buy one for myself because I love this deck. It's called the Marigold Tarot, and it's a gold deck. It's got a kind of a beautiful gilding on each card. It's all black and white and gold. And all of the cards in this deck are skeletal figures. My high priestess in this deck is holding a bouquet of living flowers in the right hand and a freshly picked pomegranate in the left hand, and is, has a crescent moon at her brow, which harkens back to that sort of Avalonian mythos, the crescent moon at the brow. I feel like, I see really readily, and she's wrapped in a shawl and she's got her head covered. I readily see in this card all the different things that were just described here. Obviously, this card might be considered, because of the skeletal nature, a bit more Hecatian than Isian, or, but definitely has that kind of mystical underworld. But I wanted to complicate the high priestess and goddesses a little bit, because there's this other layer to it I've been thinking about. The high priestess archetypically is sort of depicted as seated in her veiled state in some kind of a chamber where there's, incense wafting, candles lit. The mood is very, kind of esoteric and mystical. But in reality, as a high priestess myself, the high priestess is also about a lot of administration, a lot of making sure everything is going where it's supposed to go, making sure everybody has the things that they need in order to complete the ritual. So in this way, I can also see Goddess Bridget as a high priestess, because in the lore of Bridget, there were the priestesses who would tend her shrine, and they'd tend the flame days upon days in succession. And then the final day, Bridget herself would tend that flame, which to me connotes that kind of high priestess quality, the high priestess tending her temple and being the steward of the activities of the priestesses there, making sure everybody knows, like, Margot, you're Wednesday, and Stephanie, you're Thursday. And, that's also what the high priestess does. So I wanted to just sort of kind of add that layer. And then there's a second layer I want to add to this card for us to contemplate in the future, which is to think about Gaia as the high priestess. Gaia is the original goddess at the oracle at Delphi. Later on, it becomes an oracle to Apollo and Dionysus. But before Apollo and Dionysus are the primary deities at the oracle at Delphi, it's Gaia. And if you really think about it, the greatest mystery any of us in these human bodies deals with on an everyday basis is what's going on Earth. The snow, the rain, the why, why things bloom when they bloom, what creates mountains. How is this crystal so impossibly blue, and this one so impossibly red, and this one so impossibly green? These are a sort of a treasury of mysteries that we have right here in this earthly realm that we're always interacting with and investigating. So those are some maybe we might say non-traditional interpretations of the High Priestess card that might be fruitful for us to explore, because when we get into, and this is a little, maybe I'm revealing like a little pet peeve, but if you go on to Google, actually, you know what? I'm going to share my screen and let's do it right now. Share screen and go to Google. And we're gonna type in High Priestess. And we're just gonna do a little image search. Get ready. So of course we have all of the images of the High Priestess Tarot card. That makes sense because we're here. Oh, look, there's the one that I'm working on. Google's listening. But as we sort of go down, maybe it'll be easier if I do this. If I take the word high off and I just type the word priestess in, here we are. Pet peeve enacted immediately. Look, only thin white women, pretty much, in costumes that could not ever really be worn for anything more difficult than standing in place looking pretty. Not definitely costumes designed for tromping through the woods, carrying a whole lot of supplies so that you can get to the right place and do the ritual. Definitely not any card here or any image here depicting, well, this one maybe a little bit, priestess in the new Foot Locker campaign. Well, I have no idea where that would take me, but at least she looks like she could maybe go somewhere and do some exercise. The archetype of the priestess in our culture is generally, now we really finally have our first woman of color, visibly here. The majority of the time in the United States, at least, the kind of word of priestess ends up describing a very limited definition. And what happens when we let ourselves get stuck in that definition is that then we start to see the high priestess as being something different than ourselves. I mean, I'm just gonna venture to say, looking around here at this group of women, that the majority of us don't really look like or aren't 25 years old, white, and have an enormous budget for costume headdresses. I mean, maybe somebody here is like that. And if you are, totally love that and no criticism whatsoever. But the majority of us, I'm pretty sure, are not in that state. And yet, any of us could represent that high priestess archetype at various different times in our lives or in different ceremonies or in different settings. So for us to see the high priestess as even bigger than that, say, Persephone archetype, although she is a very fitting archetype, but to see more of like the mature woman, the older woman, the 50-year-old oracle at Delphi, really sitting and inhaling the vapors, going into an ecstasy, communicating with Gaia. This too is the high priestess. So I just thought I'd put that out there to complicate it a little bit so that we can kind of break out of that mold that we're served every time as women in spirituality, that we try to kind of make that connection with priestess. We kind of get to that little obstacle, that kind of optical obstacle of what that's supposed to look like culturally versus what the actuality is. I see Lisa's got a hand up. Lisa K. Lisa, would you like to say something? Come on off of mute and say hello. Tell us what you're thinking.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I have a Hecate tarot deck, and Autumn would like me to share the High Priestess card,
Oh,
which is actually
wonderful.
called Enlightenment, but they call them different things in this deck, but this is the High Priestess.
Okay,
I don't
yeah,
know,
hold
my
it up.
light's kind
I'm
of
gonna
bad.
spotlight you for a second so that we can see this card. Oh, hold it back just a little bit. Oh, looks like we had a little freeze for a second here.
Is it better?
Well, your screen froze. I can sort of see the outline of a woman.
Better? Can you see it?
No, unfortunately. Oh, there we go. Okay. Looks a little better. So it looks like she's got something in front of her. What is that?
She's like it's like spirits. She's pulling like on the spirits' heads, like taking them to the afterlife. It looks like, you know.
Oh, so this is
I wish you could really see it.
Yeah, now I see it. So this deck is sort of highlighting Hecate's role as a psychopomp, the one who brings the spirits between the worlds, as that high priestess meaning. Enlightenment. Interesting, because one of Hecate's titles, of course, is Phosphoros,
Correct.
the light bringer.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And that's what it
Lisa.
says on the other side, is Phosphoros. You're welcome. That's what it says on your side of Enlightenment, is Phosphoros.
Oh, wow. Well, very good. Thank you so much for
So
sharing
it's
that.
on one side it says Enlightenment, and then it says Phosphorus.
Wow.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. So that's our high priestess. So now let's move on to, what has been considered the equivalent, the male equivalent of the high priestess, although has a very distinct meaning, the Hierophant. And this one in my deck here is showing a skeleton, looking at a spark of light coming off of the, looks like the pointer finger of the right hand. There in some ferns and growth with a halo, which could be a sun or moon behind, wearing prayer beads with a distinct kind of prayer beads around the neck and a head covering. Doesn't really show if this is a male or female character, but one seems to be meant to infer that this is a male character. It's always funny when they give skeletons breasts, but I don't see them in this image. So the Hierophant is traditionally considered to be a card about tradition, esoteric knowledge, but in a less mystery-oriented way, more like traditional teachings passed on maybe by a teacher to a student or within a lineage. Sometimes the Hierophant is made to appear as kind of a figure like kind of like a bad character or a domineering character. Sometimes includes having two people there that are sort of like petitioners or students. You can't quite tell which, whereas the high priestess is usually alone. The Hierophant usually sometimes has these two beings. So if we were to say, okay, well, gods and goddesses alike could be either, who would you associate with the Hierophant, when what's really kind of the meaning is that rather than the more mystery side of spirituality, we get more the organized religion side of spirituality. Do you have any thoughts about a deity that springs to mind? And again, you're welcome to type it into the chat. Juno. Wow, I love that. Kimberly, will you bring yourself off mute and talk a little bit about Juno? I love that. And Cosette right there with her.
Hi, sweetheart. So
Hi.
I'm lounging in my jammies, so I won't torture y'all with video.
So cute.
Well, Juno, she's very interesting because by the time she, made it to the Romans, through the Olympian Hera, which isn't my Hera either, but she became very regimented, and it was all about the state ceremonies. She oversees the mint. She's like the mother queen, you know, but all of it is about the pomp and circumstance of the state. It's all
Yes.
very civilized, isn't it?
Yes.
You
And
know,
guardian of institutions such as marriage.
yes, exactly. So Juno certainly seems to relish her civilized traditions a lot more than Hera ever did. And
That's true, because we have in ancient Greece, in pre-Hellenic Greece, when we are in more like what might be considered in, I don't know how else to put it, maybe indigenous Greece, before it's
religion.
Hellenic
Yeah.
specifically, you've got Mycenaean Hera, who is like described as kind of more like Our Lady, Mother of All, kind of life giver, abundance bringer. But by the time Hera is Hellenized, and then there's Hera of, you know, the Olympians, she is kind of more of our I don't know how to put it, impotent
Well,
wife.
she's a shrew.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unhappy
bitter.
wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Bitter, vengeful.
in the Roman, she becomes the guardian of the state.
Yes, yes.
Much
And
more of
even
a state
even how
sanctioned
she's
deity.
yeah, and even how she's depicted. If you look at the iconography for Juno, you know, it's very much like the scepter, the crown. You know what I mean? They're all
And where's
symbols
the
of state.
crown with the city
Yes,
on
yes,
it?
right.
Mm-hmm.
She,
Really great.
that's who popped.
Really great. Good observation. Thank you so much, Kimberly. And I see you've got quite a cheering section in the comments. Lots of people are like, yes, yes, I feel this, you know, Juno, yes. Anybody else have a different deity, different goddess or god that you associate with the Hierophant card? I see a little exclamation point from Jennifer. Well, I have a thought about this. For me, I think of the Greek Themis as being associated with the Hierophant, whereas Athena in the Greek pantheon kind of, yeah, fulfills more of like the Juno function that Kimberly was just describing in the Roman. So Athena is like Athens, the city, the military, the government. Themis represents the social and cosmic order, the spirit of justice as opposed to the court system. And this is something that I think is really important. I think that in the United States of America, as you know, especially, we've come to see our governmental institutions and religious institutions as sort of lording over us. And, you know, that's not an incorrect interpretation. That is, in fact, a lot of the way that rule and law happen, both in terms of our government and in terms of spiritual and religious law, is that it's a set of dictates handed down from on high. But I have to tell you, my personal life path card is the Hierophant. And, you know, for me, I've always kind of been trying to rescue this archetype, this card and its archetype from the clutches of that kind of law and order rubric. Instead, I see the Hierophant as being like, I would also say that he's a living God, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the living embodiment of Avalokiteshvara or Guanyin in our world is the Hierophant, because there's that sort of gentle nature of, I keep the drum beat going through war, through famine, through plague. I keep going. I keep showing up. I keep bringing the holy. I keep bringing the sacred. When we have that kind of a zeitgeist where we're, you know, seeing our spiritual structures not as trying to dominate us, but rather as arising from an inherent natural order that's present already in the cosmos and supporting us like the Dharma does, or like, if we have a particular faith system that we believe in, like in Ifa, we go to get a divination from a practitioner using the ikin, the palm nuts, or the cowrie shells. That person is saying, I'm here to help interpret the cosmic order so that your life will go well, not to boss you around or stop you from doing anything you want to do. I'm not here to tell you sex is bad. I'm not here to tell you that you can't wear what you want or go where you want. I'm here to help you make the right decisions based on what the cosmic order already has in place for you. So I think looking into, then for me, I look at the Hierophant as like, in the Orisha tradition, as Arunmila, who is the patron god of the divination with the palm nuts or cowrie shells, and who helps people understand that there's a body of wisdom that's always been with humanity. It's an inherent wisdom, and we all are subject to it, and we all get access to it, and we also get the benefits of it. So Arunmila is one for me. And then, like I mentioned, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the living embodiment of Avalokiteshvara, who is both the temporal and spiritual leader of the Tibetan government in exile. And then Themis, the Greek Themis, who would be invoked before every other deity in any ancient Greek ceremony. They would always call upon the cosmic order to be present. And then they could go forward with their invocation of Athena or any other deity who that might be presiding over a function. So those are just some unexpected, unexpected things. And then I also would say that I invite anybody, like Ganesh. Yeah, Ganesh would, has a certain kind of, Ganesh has a certain Hierophant quality, and I can also see him in other places as well. Ganesh is just so great. I could see him as an emperor. I could see him as a wheel of fortune, but definitely the one who's tending the soul of humanity. Yep, Ganesh also has the fool quality of, daring. Ganesh fits a lot of different, so do many deities. But I did want to just sort of invite us to look differently at the Hierophant, because the Hierophant is not the domineering law and order power over. The Hierophant is also the cellular matrix that creates human flesh, and we are all subject to it. Every single last one of us has skin on our bodies, and we all have to take care of it, or else it gets, dry or cold. Yeah, Tara, go ahead. Something to say about the Hierophant.
I just want to thank you. The Hierophant has been the card that I have struggled with the most of all of the Major Arcana. I just didn't know how to get past that male religious connotation that it has. And so this was extremely helpful. I just wanted to thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying so, Tara. And, I have to say, it doesn't really help that in some decks, the Hierophant is called the Pope. I hear you. I've been up against this for my whole tarot life, being like, I'm a Hierophant, and then being like, like if I say, everybody, here's the outline of the ritual, and we all have to show up here and make sure, everybody, that you've got your basket with these items in it, then I think to myself, like, am I being that kind of a Hierophant? Am I being the one who's like, everybody do the thing? But I also know that ritual runs really well when we all show up with all our stuff in our basket on time. So, having a little bit of, somebody has to do it, right? So now, one of the things I wanted us to be able to do today to talk about the Hierophant and High Priestess is that I want us to just take a moment to notice how, not just archetypically, but stereotypically, why is it that the mystery is relegated to the feminine and the order is relegated to the masculine? When in fact, I don't know about you, but without my mom, we would have never gotten anywhere on time, and we would not have had everything we needed in our backpacks. My mom was always the very law and order person in my family who made sure we always had everything we needed and showed up on time and got there. And my dad was kind of more like off in a mist, outside in the backyard, pruning his bonsai trees, painting, doing art, you know. So I think it's really important for us to confront some of the stereotypes that we've been raised to believe about A, males and females, B, masculinity and femininity, which are not the same as male and female, and C, the Hierophant and the High Priestess. Looking at these cards and going, why would we think of this sort of High Priestess as the wild woman mystically off on her own and not being the center of spiritual authority in her community? Why would we think of the Hierophant as always being the law and order, show up on time, bring your stuff kind of guy, instead of thinking of him as the shaman, the mystic, the one who goes into trances? So we get this opportunity when we kind of go down this road of thinking about deities in the tarot. It kind of gives us an opportunity to liberate our minds from some of the presuppositions that we've experienced about the cards. And yeah, public versus private spheres, as if the High Priestess is almost always relegated to the sort of private sphere, and the Hierophant is almost always in the public sphere, when in fact it could be quite the opposite. And I see lots of comments here. Yeah, women are kingmakers, and that takes us back to that Morgan Le Fay reference for sure. Thanks everybody for contributing to that round. So now let's tackle one that's a little bit kind of, it's non-gendered, it's not sexed. Thank you, Kimberly. I'm having fun with you guys, with you Gaias too. The Chariot. So let's go to the Chariot. The Chariot card I love this in this deck, this Marigold Tarot, which by the way, you can find it online, the Marigold Tarot. If you just type it into Google, you'll find it. It goes to 13th Press, I think it's called. Shows somebody on a bicycle. I love that, the bicycle. All right, so Marissa's right here with the Chariot, Freya and Baba Yaga. I love it. Marissa, would you mind unmuting and giving us a little breakdown of why you see the Chariot, particularly as Freya? I'm right here with you.
Well, I know there's a deck out there that has one where Freya's in the chariot pulled by her cats, but that's the image I have of her in my mind as well. She's this, like, you know, fierce movement in the direction you want to be heading in, and it's very I don't know, you look at the card and it looks like it's moving fast, you know, so
Yeah.
I love that kind of aspect of her. And
Yeah,
like, the deck I'm using is the light
principle.
Yeah, the Light Seers Tarot is the one I'm using, and it looks almost like a gypsy caravan pulled by horses, which kind of brings to mind Freya in my head also, because she has that kind of loving, fun, free-spirited, but also the mysterious underside of that. But it's all about the power and movement. So
you're right. And you know, Freya accompanies soldiers into battle and carries their souls back to Valhalla, you know, and instantiates them, you know, the souls of those who died on the battlefield honorably, she puts into her own great hall, where then they're totally entertained by beauty and sensuality and good food and drink, and you know, they're celebrated and lauded. And the Chariot does have that kind of poised there, where it could go either way quality, so that it is like that journey into the battle. Will I make it? Will I not make it? If I make it, will I make it on, you know, will I be stuck here on earth, or will I die a hero and go on to Freya's Valhalla, her beautiful, you know, palace of pleasure? So I really love that. And yes, I think I've seen that deck too. I don't know if it's in Chris Walderhurst's deck or whose deck, but I've seen that card of Freya with her cats pulling the Chariot, and it's so great. And then I saw it go by my face here, Ishtar. Oh, it's in Catherine Skaggs' deck. Thanks, Kimberly. I see, Kimberly, you mentioned Ishtar. Tell us a little bit about your connection of Ishtar with the Chariot. I love this. I know very little bit about Babylonian and Mesopotamian and Sumerian deities. So break it down for us.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this is probably a little bit more Kabbalistic for me to associate, because the chariot is associated with Geburah, which is Mars, right? And it's very Martian energy, very warrior-like energy. And Ishtar also is depicted in ancient times with the chariot, right? She goes into battle. And what's very interesting too about chariot, now I use the Toth Tarot. So we have a knight in full armor, in the Toth deck. But what's so interesting, we don't usually see goddesses in battle gear, and Ishtar has been depicted that way.
So
And as has Freya when she's in that Valkyrie, mode. So that just, I don't know, she just gives off that more Martian energy. And she's very tied in to civilization as well, interestingly, and as the protector of the state.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you think about that, she would have led, the charge to war.
You're right. And you're absolutely right. And you're bringing forward a meaning of this chariot card, which I rarely think about, but you're absolutely right. Thinking about the chariot as the vehicle of going into battle, and the kind of pause before the battle, as you're kind of there marshaling your resources and getting together. Myself, I often tend to think about the chariot as more related to going from place to place, transportation. I often will get the chariot card in a reading when somebody's thinking about buying a new car, right? That's a pretty common interpretation. And Danielle's contributing, that's the image that I've been thinking of. Krishna and Arjuna before battle. Wow, powerful. Yeah, Danielle, would you like to unpack that a little? Maybe bring yourself off mute and unpack that if you feel like it. Oh, I can't hear you yet. There we go. Now I can hear you.
I spent a lot of time with the Hare Krishnas, and was reading their stories so much, just like fairy tales, bedtime stories, and the chariot. That even just hearing the word, I automatically just have that vision in my head when I think of it. So when you said war,
genius. Yeah, genius. Krishna and Arjuna preparing for battle does really make sense. And the chariot, for me also, I think of Hermes when I think of the chariot, because Hermes is that he's a psychopomp, so he goes between the worlds. And then he's also associated with transportation and commerce and negotiations. And sometimes I get the chariot, like I mentioned, about things like cars and going places, trips and travel. But I also sometimes get the chariot when you're kind of like about to enter a negotiation, like you're going to have to kind of find a way to finesse making a couple different people happy, or including a couple different points of view that don't always agree. And so that chariot for me sometimes represents that balance. And I think of Hermes as having the right kind of silver tongue to be able to negotiate between sometimes opposing extremes. I also think of the chariot, and I know often the goddess Iris, who is kind of the counterpart to Hermes in Greek mythology, she's often represented as the temperance card, which does make sense. But I also can see Iris, the Greek goddess of the messenger and go-between, as being a chariot, kind of not so much that she carries people from place to place, but she brings messages from place to place. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out Ogun in the Orisha tradition as potentially having chariot energy as well. Ogun is associated with things like railroads and iron and trains. And so I think of that as kind of, Ogun is kind of like getting stuff from place to place, and moving bodies, moving people, moving items Anybody else have any last thoughts on the chariot? This has been really fertile. Thank you. But any last thoughts on the chariot before we move on?
I just want to add to your comment about Iris because that one stood out to me as well. And I know we've been talking a lot about like the sort of warrior battle side or movement side, but the chariot is also about control and order and determination and success. And so I think that deities like Ogun and Hermes and Iris very much represent that keeping order, determination, doing what you need to do, taking those actions.
Yes. And like making sure the memo gets there on time, making sure that, like this I's are dotted and T's are crossed on the document so that nobody's misunderstanding. And then Kimberly contributed Babylon in the thelemic cosmology. Yeah, the lady riding the back of the beast, she's definitely going places and marshaling sensuality and power. So this is a nice little unlocking of a variety of different thoughts around the chariot so that next time you get that card, I know for me, next time I get that card, I'm not going to automatically presume it's time to go buy a new car. So now let's look at the Hermit. The Hermit. In this deck, the Hermit is sitting quietly in repose. His lantern or her lantern is represented resting on the knee. Almost looks in a way without the prayer beads, but has a similar headdress to the Hierophant, which is interesting. So the Hermit, of course, often represents solitude, quiet, aloneness. Those are the obvious sort of surface level meanings. I also think of the Hermit as representing a kind of spiritual or practical leadership style that is very quiet and graceful, as opposed to being bombastic and outwardly authoritative. Kimberly contributes Mary Magdalene in her later years as the Hermit. When she kind of retired from public priestesshood and instead was more of a contemplative. Anybody else? Yeah, Laura, Bridget, would you like to unmute and unpack Bridget, Laura, as the Hermit? Tell us a little bit about what suggests that for you.
So as I was thinking about it, I just thought of her wisdom and knowledge and the quietness, but just with the light, the lantern there. I don't have any cards, so I'm looking at your cards.
Yes, the carrying of the lamp.
The sun leading with a quiet integrity of just knowledge and wisdom.
I love
shining her light.
Yes, I really see that. And I can see where applying a Bridget lens to the Hermit card, it's interesting. It warms up the card, doesn't it? Rather than the Hermit being sort of, I think, again, these are cultural presumptions, and we are all steeped in them, that the Hermit is necessarily lonely. But a lot of times people associate the Hermit with loneliness rather than, a kind of a quiet dignity, quiet integrity, as Kimberly is contributing here. And I love the idea of Bridget tending her flame in the night as the Hermit, or like, I can think of that's so inspiring for a priestess or for a mother who's nursing by the nightlight. There's something so beautiful about that quiet time. Or I know in our priestess program, there's lots of women who get up, because I tell our priestesses in training that we have to spend 15 to 20 minutes of silence without interruption, no phone, nothing, every day. And a lot of women choose to get up before the rest of their family because they know it's the only time they're going to have it. And I love that, image of like the mother quietly sipping her coffee with her little candle lit in front of her before everybody wakes up as the Hermit. I also think, and I see here, we've got a couple others here, retreating from society, exactly. Lilith, after leaving the garden, Circe on her island Marissa, I love that. And Hestia, yeah. Hestia, I was going to mention, not so much in her Hestia form, although I agree. Hestia in ancient Greece does not have any real temples. She's honored at the hearth of each place. And I was going to mention Vesta, which is the Roman Hestia. And primarily I was going to mention it because of the Vestal Virgins. The Vestal Virgins were the priestesshood to whom the benefit of the state was entrusted. They tended a perpetual flame. They were not allowed to allow it to go out. They couldn't let it go out. They were not allowed to have any partner. And in fact, if a Vestal Virgin was known to have sex with somebody or to choose an intimate partner, she would be taken, wrapped in 3 different layers of leather, burlap, and linen. She would be marched through the streets of the city and placed in a cell inside the outer wall of the city, and they would put 1 oil lamp, a little bowl of water, and a little bowl of some food, and they would mortar closed the room, and she would be placed in there and just to be basically buried alive. Although that because in ancient Roman culture it was considered wrong to put someone to death like that, and because she was a woman of the state and a holy woman, they said that by leaving that little bit of oil lamp and that little bit of water and that little bit of food, that they hadn't been the ones who killed her. And that's how they justified that they had murdered a woman for choosing to enjoy the pleasures of sexuality, if she had violated her law. Now, I don't really think of the hermit as having necessarily that negative connotation always, but I can see where the strict, the sort of strict rule about maintaining your chastity could fit with this hermit card image. I see some others down in the chat. Lady of the Lake, a little bit for me. Yes, absolutely. Kind of the, Lady of the Lake is alone. She's there tending that sword until the moment when she can bring it forth. That's her whole job, right? Is to be that kind of, that presence. I can also see where the hermit card could resonate with Baba Yaga, who was mentioned earlier, as the old woman living at the edge of society, living happily outside of the bounds of society, because then nobody can tell her what to do, who to be, and I think of Baba Yaga or Baba Yaga is the way it's supposed to be pronounced, as the hermit. And in large part, I think of Baba Yaga as the hermit, as in like, get off my lawn. Don't come tell me what to do. You don't get to tell me anything. I'll do whatever I want over here myself. I'm over here with my brews and potions. And if you come too close, you might regret it. But if you're noble, I will help you. And I think that there's some aspect in the hermit of that discernment, that kind of discernment. If you know how to treat the hermit, if you are noble and dignified in yourself, the hermit will not mind your company. But the hermit is the hermit because she doesn't really think that most people are living correctly. She doesn't like how society has shaped itself, and she certainly doesn't want to conform. So I see in that hermit card a little bit of the nonconformist, and I like the wild witch of the woods, Baba Yaga, for that. Okay, so I have 3 more cards, but really only time to do 1 more because I really want us to do this exercise. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to save the star card for our poem, and let's pick death or judgment. I'm going to let the card decide. I don't know which is which. What is it? Death. Okay, well.
Death, yay.
Hey. So immediately we have Kali. I myself associate with Santa Muerte. Who else has death goddesses for 100, Alex? Anybody have one that they want to contribute? The Morrigan, Hecate. I very much see those two. The Morrigan, especially, another battle goddess, so specifically associated with death. Oya, yes, in the Yoruba tradition. Oya, the guardian of the cemetery. There's another Orisha, Yewa, who's another guardian of the cemetery, definitely associated with death and the rites of death. Maman Brigitte, the Loi of the cemetery and of the other world, the afterlife. There's also, if we look into some of the like mythologies of like, the sirens fit here, like singing sailors to their deaths, luring them onto the rocks. And then, yeah, Kimberly says Ma'at is death and a judgment combo. Is it death and judgment? That's right. We get to hold up both if we're looking at Ma'at. And then hell, says Marissa. Yeah, hell, absolutely, the Norse goddess of death and the underworld. And of course, Persephone resonates here. Not too difficult for us to find lots and lots of different examples of death. But let's not forget that the death card also connotes rebirth. And so, any goddess that has that kind of, Caradwyn is another one who has that kind of ability to regenerate or rejuvenate, who has a cyclic nature. I can also see, we could look at any number of different deities that are associated with passion, love, war, as Arianrhod, the shining silver wheel, the wheel of life, as fitting in with this death card. Does anyone have any non-traditional interpretations of the death card now that we've kind of been unlocking our minds? Any interpretations of the death card which we think, oh, hadn't thought of it that way? There is, let me look up so that I get it right. Okay, I'm sorry, give me one quick sec, but I want to get her name right. Is it Benziten? There we go. Benziten is a Japanese goddess who originates from the Hindu goddess Sarasvati. Worship of her arrived in Japan in the 6th through 8th centuries, mainly through the translations of the Sutra of Golden Light. Benziten is the goddess of love, beauty, eloquence, and music, as well as the sea. But her husband was a cruel and wicked dragon, and she tamed him. And then when she tamed him, she then is depicted as riding a dragon. And in a way, I could see Benziten and her husband as a death card, where when we're describing, especially since this is a sutra context, we're describing the death of the ego. So she tames the dragon that is her husband. That's symbolic of her gentleness and her beauty, sort of suppressing and taming that authoritative, kind of domineering capacity. And I see down here, Danielle says, ego death was my first thought. And a lot of different Buddhist deities then fit that. Tara suggests Durga, and Marissa brings in, yes, Inanna in the sense of descent and ascent. Absolutely. These are really powerful. Inanna and Ereshkigal hardly, could put both of them on a death card. And it would really neatly summarize that journey of life, death, and rebirth. Very powerful. All right, so let's now close with, we're going to do this part for this part is the rest of the class. We are going to do a prayer or poem. So this is where you're going to need either your pen and paper or your device to take notes. We're going to each take a few moments, and I'm going to guide us through writing a prayer or poem for a goddess that we, or God, it can be a god if you want, that we associate with the star. So the star comes in the deck after the tower. The tower is when everything explodes, things are difficult, things are all over the place. Big can be good, can be bad, doesn't have to be one or the other. Can just be stressful, you know, feeling overwhelmed. Then the star comes, and the star brings hope, promise, potential, newness, calm, and balm. So let's all take a moment and just personally, don't tell yet, think about who you're going to name as your star goddess or star god for the purposes of our creative exercise. So let's just take one moment, look at your card, think about who is your star. Let's just hold that for a moment. And once you kind of have the name of who you'd like to do this prayer or poem for in mind, go ahead and write that at the top of your notes. Now, I'm going to guide you in how we're going to write these poems or these prayers. First, we're going to write a descriptive line. So this is, we are going to say to this being something about them that we like you of the golden orb of life, or you of the longevity and health of humanity. So we'd say so-and-so, comma, you of, or so-and-so, you who do this, or so-and-so, I'm inspired by your, or however you want to put it. We're going to write one line. What do they do? Okay, next we're going to write, and it's okay if you're not done with that one yet, that's fine. You can finish it. But after we write who they are, we're going to write where are they, or, you know, who they are and what they do. Now we're going to write where are they? Where are you? You who live below the ocean, you who, you know, shine down from the night sky, you who circle the sun. So, deity, something that you admire about them, where they are. Now we're going to move on. Our next line will be, what do you mean to humanity and our world? What do you mean to humanity and our world? And I'm going to write these notes in the chat so you have it. What do you mean to humanity? After this, we've got one more line about a sort of description. What do they look like, feel like, act like, or seem like? Descriptive line. Next. Sorry, I have a dry spot in my throat. Okay. The next question. What do you teach me? What do you teach me? And lastly, a question. Ask a question of this being. Something that you'd like to have answered. All right. So now, is there anybody who feels brave enough to share what you've written?
I can share.
Great, Lisette, go ahead.
Okay. So, who is my star? Bridget. And this is what I wrote. Bridget, you beautiful goddess of inspiration and healing. You who live in the hearth and in the flames of every candle and lantern in our world. You are an advocate for justice and a healing balm of warmth and love for our environment and for all people on earth. With your curly red hair and radiant eyes that light up the morning as the solar brilliance that you are. You fill me with inspiration and the desire to heal and create. How can I deepen my relationship with you?
Oh, love it. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being brave. And thank you for sharing that beautiful prayer poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see we've got some applause. Great job. Is there anyone else who feels brave enough to share?
I would love to share.
Christina, great.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, well, maybe I'll turn on the light. I feel like no one can see me. This poem is to the constellation Aquarius. Aquarius, you who bring the new age of transformation and clarity. You who glitter with light in the night sky. You are not water, but you bear water, carrying it to parched life with the fresh ideas of air. I feel your compassion and it brings me hope. My perspective widens and I can see a wider truth through the crisp winter night. Will you bless me with a new beginning?
Oh, gorgeous. That is so lovely. These are so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Christina. Brilliant.
Yeah, it was so fun. Thank you.
And I hope that you all might consider posting some of these in the Goddess Temple app in the Tea and Tarot group. Is there anybody else? We have time for maybe one or two more. Anyone else brave to share? There's no criticism here, only support. I have one. I'll share mine. I have a hymn to the Pleiades. Star-winged sisters, celestial doves riding cosmic winds, You circle the target of Orion's arrow, ready to burst forth in a sudden shower of feathers and light. Barely visible to the naked eye, yet ever present in your influence, you stir the hearts of the pure ones to spill their silver blood upon sure feet that stand without trembling before the lords of time. Star blossoms riding the curling tiger's tail, the power of the arrow is not in its flight, but in the tension that precedes it. Breathlessly, the vault of heaven anticipates Orion's shot. 2 fingers, 40 pounds of resistance, the curve of the cheek, the knock holding the bowstring like a lover between her legs. When his arrow flies, will you drop to the earth as meteors for the jewelry of wealthy women? Or will you fly forever free, trailing silver streams of light like peals of laughter rising from a group of teenage girls whispering secrets behind their hands in a world they've created entirely their own? So that's me, the hymn to the Pleiades. Come on, one more person, please make my night and share.
That was beautiful, Yeshi.
That was outstanding.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was like prose. That was amazing.
Thank you. I had certain pieces of it already in my head that I, want to hear it. Truth time. The whole reason I did this class tonight is because I really wanted us to write poems to goddesses.
You needed to get that out, and you needed that prompt to do it, because it was like, wait a minute, how did she do that? And that we didn't have that much time.
No, I had a few of the phrases that were like sort of scattered, and I was like, well, someday I'll write a thing to bring them together. And then I was like, oh, tonight. And then when I saw it was the star card was the last one, I was like, I'm going to finish that Pleiades poem.
Yeah. That was really, really stunning. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Hello. Hi, I'll be right there.
I don't think anyone will share after that. I certainly couldn't.
Okay. You're funny. Well, I don't want anyone to feel intimidated. I did have a little head start. All right. Well, listen, looks like I've got someone showing up at the door and my phone is ringing at the same time. So I think class is over. Much love, everyone. Have a great night. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.